A starving 11-year-old boy ran straight into Keanu Reeves while searching for scraps to keep his sick mother alive. Instead of fear, Keanu saw something hauntingly familiar in the child's eyes, but when the boy whispered why he needed food, everything changed, and Keanu made a decision that would alter all their lives forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The sun had barely risen over downtown Los Angeles when 11-year-old Evan Morales stepped into the cold morning air, his breath turning into thin clouds that faded as quickly as his hope. The plaza was already filling with people. Volunteers unfolded tables, speakers crackled to life. The bright banners advertising a charity event stood in painful contrast to the hunger twisting in his stomach. Evan clutched his torn backpack close to his chest. Inside, a handful of empty cans clattered against each other, worth barely enough for a discounted loaf of bread if he could find more before noon. But time wasn't on his side today. His mother hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Her illness had grown worse overnight, and she lay weak and trembling inside their battered minivan parked 2 blocks away. He had promised her he would find food no matter what. Evan scanned the plaza quickly. The refreshment tables were near the center, surrounded by volunteers arranging boxes of bottled water and sandwiches. He didn't need much. Just a single lunchbox could help his mother rest a little longer, maybe even stop the coughing that kept her awake all night. But the crowd was growing fast, and he knew once the event started, security would push people away from areas meant for staff. He tugged the straps of his backpack higher, lowered his head, and moved quickly, trying to look like he belonged there. The noise of the crowd swelled around him. Laughter, conversations, the thumping bass from the event sound check. It all blurred into background static as Evan slipped between adults who barely noticed him. Hunger sharpened his focus into something close to desperation. If he could reach the side of the table, maybe he could grab a sandwich before anyone realized he wasn't part of the event. He didn't want to steal. He just didn't know how else to keep his mother alive. A gust of wind cut through his thin jacket. He shivered but kept moving. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as the table came into sight. Volunteers turned away for a moment, distracted by a barking dog on the other side of the plaza. This was his chance. He took a step forward, then another. His fingers stretched toward one of the boxes. Then everything crashed. Someone stepped directly in front of him, and Evan slammed into something solid. His body bounced back, and he hit the ground hard. His backpack flew open on impact, scattering his precious cans across the concrete. They rolled in every direction, with loud metallic clinks that drew a few glances, but no help. People saw an 11-year-old kid fall, but looked away as if falling children didn't matter. Evan scrambled on his hands and knees, gathering the cans in a panic. His breath came in sharp bursts. If security noticed him, they would chase him off the plaza, and he'd lose any chance of bringing food to his mother. He couldn't let that happen. Not today. A shadow lowered beside him. A pair of worn boots came into view. Then a voice calm and gentle cut through his panic. "Hey, are you okay?" Evan froze. He lifted his eyes slowly and saw a man kneeling beside him, lifting a pair of sunglasses onto his head. The morning light hit his face, and Evan's breath caught. It was Keanu Reeves. The black motorcycle jacket, slightly scuffed from years of use. The quiet expression. The warm, steady eyes that didn't look through him like everyone else did. They looked at him. Not past him. At him. And that changed everything. For a moment, Evan couldn't move. He knelt frozen on the cold concrete while Keanu quietly reached for one of the cans that had rolled farther away. The actor didn't hesitate to touch the dirty metal or kneel on the dusty ground. He picked up the can, examined it briefly, then placed it gently into Evan's backpack as if it were something valuable. That alone confused the boy. Most adults acted disgusted by the sight of him collecting cans. Most pretended he wasn't there. But Keanu didn't look disgusted. He looked concerned. "You're not hurt, right?" Keanu asked, his voice low and steady. "That was a rough fall." Evan shook his head quickly. His hands trembled as he gathered the remaining cans. He didn't understand what was happening, only that someone far too important was paying attention to him. He didn't want attention. Attention made people ask questions. Questions made everything dangerous. He tugged the zipper closed on his backpack and tried to stand. "I'm sorry," he whispered, keeping his eyes down. "I didn't mean to bump into you. I'll go." But Keanu didn't move aside. Instead, he rose slowly to his feet and offered the boy a hand. "You don't have to rush off," he said gently. "You look like you're freezing. Have you eaten yet?" The simple question hit Evan harder than the fall. He swallowed. His throat tightened. For a second, he almost lied. It would have been easier to lie, but something in Keanu's voice made him answer honestly, his words barely audible. "No, not today." Keanu nodded once, a small movement, full of understanding. The noise of the plaza faded behind them, as if the world had stepped back for a moment. He studied Evan's thin frame, the shivering, the sunken cheeks. When his gaze shifted to the plaza behind them, the volunteers, the food, the crowds, it was clear he understood exactly why Evan had been heading toward those tables. Then Keanu's eyes softened even more, and he asked quietly, "Is your family here with you?" The question made Evan's heart jump. He clutched his backpack tighter and stepped back. Family. That word always felt like an alarm bell now. If he said too much, someone might call the police or child services, and he would be taken from his mother. His mother had warned him again and again, never talk about where they slept, never talk about being alone, never talk about her sickness unless absolutely necessary. But Evan's face must have revealed more than he meant it to. Keanu didn't push. He simply waited. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Evan whispered, "It's not for me. The food, it's for my mom." Keanu's expression changed instantly. A quiet seriousness settled over him. "Your mom," he repeated softly. "Is she all right?" Evan hesitated again, but the truth pressed against his chest like a weight. "She hasn't eaten since yesterday. She's sick and I don't know what else to do." The words came out fragile and trembling. Keanu gently placed a hand on Evan's shoulder. Not forceful, not pitying, just steady, grounding. Something warm moved through Evan's chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. Keanu drew a breath. That brief moment revealed something, a flicker of memory. A flash of emotion, as if the boy's words had pulled him back into his own past. Then he made a decision. "Evan?" he said quietly. "Come with me." Evan stared at him confused. Keanu's voice softened even more. "Let's take care of your mom." Evan stared up at Keanu, unsure if he had heard him correctly. People didn't say things like that. Not to kids like him. Not in places like this. The plaza noise faded into a distant blur as Keanu waited for an answer, his hand still resting gently on the boy's shoulder. I can't," Evan stammered. "If I leave, someone might take the food. And my mom, she's alone. I have to get back before she wakes up scared." Keanu nodded, as if every worry made perfect sense. He didn't dismiss the fear or rush the boy. Instead, he crouched again to meet Evan's eyes. "You're not leaving her," he said softly. "You're helping her, and you don't have to do it alone today." Those words struck Evan harder than anything else. Not alone. He couldn't remember the last time someone said something like that to him. Maybe never. Keanu glanced toward the food tables, then toward the street that led to the abandoned parking lot. His voice stayed calm, deliberate, certain. "We'll get what you need. Then you and we'll go to your mom together." Evan's breath shook. His hands tightened around his backpack straps. Every instinct told him not to trust strangers, but Keanu didn't feel like a stranger. He felt like someone who understood what hunger looked like, what fear sounded like, what a child carried when the world stopped noticing. Evan finally nodded, and with that small, trembling motion, everything began to change. Long before Evan collided with Keanu in that crowded plaza, his mornings began in a world most people never saw. He woke to the faint rattle of wind pushing against thin van doors. The smell of cold air mixed with damp upholstery and the soft groans of his mother trying to shift her aching body in the seat beside him. The minivan had once been their family car. Now it was home. The vehicle sat behind an abandoned discount store where weeds poked through cracked pavement. The paint on the building had peeled so badly that the letters were unreadable. No one came here anymore except stray cats and people looking for someplace hidden. For Evan, hidden meant safety. Hidden meant no security guards telling them to move. Hidden meant his mother could rest for a few more hours before the day demanded something from him. Evan sat up slowly, rubbing warmth into his numb fingers. The sun was barely touching the horizon, but he needed to start early. He checked on his mother first. Lucia Morales lay curled beneath 2 blankets, her breathing shallow. Her dark hair clung to her forehead with sweat, even though the November air was sharp and cold. When she opened her eyes, the pain was immediate and visible. "Morning, baby," she whispered. Her voice was thin, scraped raw from nights of coughing. She reached for his face, but winced halfway. Dropping her hand onto her lap. "Rest, Mom," he said gently. "I'm going to get a few cans before people wake up." She tried to sit up. "Evan, no. You should rest. You barely slept." "We're okay," he replied, using the same lie he used every day. "I'll be back soon." Lucia closed her eyes again, defeated by the exhaustion she fought constantly. She hated relying on her son. She hated watching him become older than his years, but she couldn't change what her body had done to her. Her illness had crept into her life like a thief taking away her stamina, then her job, and finally their home. The autoimmune disease made her joints swell and her muscles burn. Even opening a jar or lifting a cup could make her gasp with pain. 3 months earlier, she could still work part-time at a bakery. 3 months earlier, they had a small apartment with a warm shower and a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon on good days. But the symptoms worsened. The job disappeared. Bills piled up. And eventually the eviction notice arrived. They packed their lives into a cardboard box, then into the minivan, then into nothing at all. Evan had adapted faster than she did. He learned how to search behind restaurants without drawing attention. He learned which dumpsters were cleaner and which back doors had employees kind enough to leave extra food near the bins instead of inside them. He learned to avoid police patrols by memorizing their routes. He learned how to make $1 last all day. He also learned how to hide fear so his mother wouldn't see it. As he quietly opened the van door, the cold air flooded inside. Lucia shivered beneath her blankets. "Be careful," she said, "and don't talk to anyone you don't know. People aren't always what they seem." Evan gave a small smile. "Neither are we." He stepped outside and closed the door gently. The parking lot was silent, except for the rustle of leaves. His day of survival had begun again, just like every day before. Evan tucked his hands into his sleeves to keep them warm as he walked toward the alley behind the discount store. The early morning shadows stretched long across the pavement, and every sound seemed louder in the emptiness. A loose soda can rolling a distant siren, the flutter of pigeons perched on broken power lines. He scanned the ground automatically, already trained to spot anything recyclable. A glint of metal caught his eye near a trash bin. He reached for it quickly and added the can to his backpack, the soft clank echoing in the chilly air. He moved with quiet efficiency through his usual route, stepping carefully over cracked cement and old cardboard. Behind Ray's Pizza, the smell of last night's slices lingered in the air. Ray himself wasn't there yet, but Evan checked the dumpster out of habit. It was locked today, a chain wrapped around the lid with a new padlock, probably after complaints from the health inspectors. That meant one less place where he might find a scrap of food. He tried the burger place next. Nothing. Then the grocery store loading dock. Nothing but crushed boxes and spilled produce too rotten to save. He kept searching because he had to. His mother needed medicine. She needed meals he couldn't afford. The recycling center paid 5 cents per can, 10 if they were clean and uncrushed. On a good day, he could make a couple of dollars. On a bad day, nothing at all. As he crouched beside another bin, he heard footsteps approaching from the street. His heart jumped. Without thinking, he slipped behind the dumpster and crouched low. His mother's warnings replayed in his mind. Trusting the wrong adult could destroy everything. He waited, barely breathing, until the footsteps faded. When he peeked out, the street was empty again. He exhaled shakily and continued gathering what he could. By mid-morning, the weight of the cans in his backpack gave him a small sense of accomplishment. Not much, but something. Enough to buy bread if he found a few more. Enough to make his mother smile even for a moment. That was worth everything. Before he returned to the minivan, he made a quick stop at the gas station restroom. He washed his face, scrubbing hard at the grime on his cheeks. He tried to flatten his hair with water from his palms. If he looked clean enough, people wouldn't stare. People staring was dangerous. People asking questions was worse. He studied his reflection. His eyes looked older than they should. His cheeks were hollow, his sweater too thin for the season, but he forced a smile anyway. His mom worried less when he smiled. At the corner near the gas station, there was a small donation box for used books. He checked it whenever he passed by. Today he found a worn paperback wedged between mystery novels. A children's adventure story, one he'd started reading once at school, but never finished because school had disappeared along with everything else. He tucked the book into his backpack carefully. It would give his mom something to listen to later. He always read to her during her worst days. It reminded them both of a time when life felt normal. When he returned to the minivan, Lucia was awake, but coughing. The sound tore through him. He rushed to open the door. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "I found some cans. And look, I got a book." Lucia forced a small smile, but he could see the worry in her eyes. Her cough had grown harsher this week. She tried to hide it, but she couldn't hide how much it hurt. Evan sat beside her, holding her hand gently. This was why he searched for food. Why he braved the cold. Why he pushed through fear every day, because he couldn't lose her. Evan stayed beside his mother until her coughing eased. Her breathing steadied, but exhaustion pulled at her features. She brushed a trembling hand across his cheek, trying to smile through the pain. "You're doing too much for me," she murmured. "You should be playing, going to school, not running around the city looking for cans." Evan shook his head quickly. "I'm helping. That's what matters." He reached into his backpack and brought out the book he had found. Lucia touched the cover with a soft, aching nostalgia. "You loved this one," she said, "back when things were different." Evan didn't respond. He didn't want to drag her into memories that hurt. Before she could say more, movement across the distant street caught his attention. Dozens of volunteers were gathering near the plaza where a charity event was being set up. Bright tables, banners, and most importantly, food. Real food. The kind that came in boxes, freshly prepared. Evan watched the crowd with a mix of longing and fear. His mother followed his gaze, instantly understanding. "No," she whispered. "You can't go there. Too many people. Too many risks." "But they always have leftovers," Evan said quietly. "And you haven't eaten." Lucia's eyes filled with worry, but hunger left little room for choices. The moment Evan nodded in acceptance, Keanu rose to his feet with quiet purpose. The plaza bustled with noise around them, but the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, standing near scattered cans and a crushed patch of concrete. Keanu slipped his sunglasses into his jacket pocket and offered Evan the smallest, most reassuring smile. It wasn't the smile of a celebrity being polite. It was the smile of someone who understood what it felt like to be lost in plain sight. "Let's get these picked up," Keanu said gently. He crouched again and handed Evan another can that had rolled under a bench. As the boy tucked it carefully into his backpack, Keanu noticed something lodged beside the zipper, a prescription bottle with Lucia's name on it. The label was worn from use, the edges curled, the dosage instructions faded. But one detail jumped out immediately. The medication was for chronic autoimmune swelling, and the refill date was weeks overdue. Keanu's heart tightened. He remembered nights from his own childhood when illness and instability made every meal uncertain. He remembered watching his mother struggle and pretending not to notice, because acknowledging it made the fear grow. He had seen kids like Evan before through volunteer programs, kids who carried an entire household on their shoulders. Evan zipped the backpack quickly, hoping Keanu hadn't noticed the bottle. But Keanu's gaze was gentle, not probing. You're collecting these for cash? Keanu asked, motioning toward the cans. Evan nodded. 5 cents each, sometimes 10. That must take a lot of work. Another nod. Silence settled for a moment as the crowd's cheers echoed behind them. A speaker was being tested, causing a burst of static to ripple through the plaza. Evan winced at the noise and instinctively stepped back, ready to disappear into the crowd before security noticed him. But Keanu placed a calm hand on his shoulder, stopping him without force. "You're not in trouble," he said quietly. "Not with me." Evan's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He wished he believed that. He wished life had taught him that adults meant well. But most of the time adults meant questions, and questions meant danger. Keanu reached into one of the food boxes on a nearby table. A volunteer greeted him warmly, but didn't make a big scene. Most of them recognized him, but Keanu had a way of moving through the world that discouraged attention. He grabbed a boxed lunch from the stack and returned to Evan, holding it out with both hands. "Here," Keanu said. "Take it for now." Evan shook his head immediately. I can't. My mom says we shouldn't take things unless we earn them." Keanu nodded, respecting the refusal. "Your mom sounds like a strong woman." Evan swallowed hard and looked down. "She is." Keanu lowered the lunchbox a bit, not forcing it. "How about we walk over together?" he suggested. "I'll talk to the volunteers. They usually have extras left over at events like this. They won't mind if a few find good homes." This time, Evan hesitated. Not because he didn't want the food, but because accepting the help felt like crossing a line he didn't fully understand. Still, he found himself walking beside Keanu toward the tables. Keanu spoke briefly with a woman wearing a staff badge. She responded with a sympathetic nod and quietly filled a second lunchbox. Keanu made sure the exchange looked natural so that Evan didn't feel exposed or singled out. When they returned to the edge of the plaza, Keanu held the food gently between them. "No pressure," he said softly. "Just an option." Evan reached out with trembling fingers. This time he took it. Evan held the lunchbox as though it might vanish if he blinked. The cardboard felt warm in his hands, reminding him painfully of how long it had been since he'd carried a fresh meal instead of cold leftovers. But even with hunger twisting inside him, he didn't open it. Not yet. Not until he figured out what Keanu wanted, or whether this kindness would suddenly turn into something dangerous. Keanu didn't rush him. He stood nearby, giving the boy space to breathe. Around them, the charity event grew louder. A speaker on stage introduced the next performer. Applause rippled across the plaza. Volunteers handed out wristbands and flyers. No one paid attention to the quiet conversation happening near the edge, which was exactly how Keanu wanted it. "You're taking this home to your mom, right?" Keanu asked softly. The question hit Evan like a jolt. His grip tightened on the lunchbox. His eyes darted around, instinctively checking for anyone who might be listening. He took a small step back, pressing the food protectively against his chest. I should go," he whispered. Keanu raised both hands slowly, palms out as if calming a frightened animal. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to explain anything you're not ready to. I just want to understand." Evan stood frozen. The wind tugged at his jacket, and the noise of the plaza felt suddenly overwhelming. He hadn't meant to reveal anything. Not about his mom, not about their situation. One slip could be enough for someone to call authorities, and then he couldn't even think about the rest. Keanu seemed to read the fear trembling in his posture. He lowered himself back into a crouch so his eyes were level with Evan's again. "I'm not here to judge you," Keanu said gently, "or to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I just want to know if your mom is safe." Evan swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. "She's fine." He lied quickly. She's okay." Keanu didn't push back. He didn't call out the lie. He just studied Evan's face for a long moment. The exhaustion, the hollow cheeks, the sadness in his eyes that no 11-year-old should carry. "You remind me of someone I used to know," Keanu said quietly. "Someone who had to grow up fast, someone who had to take care of people before anyone took care of him." Evan didn't know what to say. No one talked to him like this. Adults usually accused him of causing trouble, or asked questions he couldn't afford to answer. But Keanu spoke with a softness that made Evan's defenses tremble. Finally, Keanu glanced at the backpack again. The prescription bottle peeked through the partially closed zipper just enough for him to read Lucia's name. He caught the detail silently, holding the knowledge, without reacting in a way that would frighten the boy. "Evan," he said gently, "is your mom sick?" The boy froze. His breath hitched. His first instinct was to deny it, but the truth rose in his chest like a weight he couldn't swallow down. Before he could answer, Keanu placed a steady hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "You can tell me," he said. "I'm not going to call anyone. I'm not going to make decisions for you. I just want to help, if you'll let me." Tears pooled behind Evan's eyes. He blinked them back hard, refusing to let them fall. "She's sick," he whispered finally. The words shook in the air between them. Then he added even softer, "And we don't have anywhere else to go." Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't show pity. He simply nodded once, as if confirming something he had already suspected. "Thank you for trusting me," he said quietly. For a long moment, Keanu stayed silent. Not the heavy silence of judgment, but the kind that lets a child breathe after admitting something too big for his shoulders. Evan wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve, embarrassed, but Keanu didn't look away. He simply nodded with quiet understanding. "Thank you," Keanu said softly. That took courage. Evan kept his gaze on the ground. I don't want her taken away. If people find out, they'll separate us. I can't let that happen." Keanu felt something shift inside him. He recognized the depth of that fear. He had seen it in shelters, in support programs, in the faces of kids who had learned too early that the world could break families apart. He chose his next words carefully. "No one is taking you from her," Keanu said. "Not today. Not while I'm here." Evan looked up, startled by the certainty in his voice. Keanu held his gaze. "Let me meet your mom. Only if you want me to. I'm not here to force anything. I just want to understand how to help." Those 4 simple words carried a promise. "Let me meet her." Evan hesitated, then slowly nodded. Evan led the way out of the plaza with hesitant steps, glancing back every few seconds to make sure Keanu was still following. The farther they moved from the noise of the event, the quieter the world became. The streets transitioned from crowded walkways to cracked sidewalks lined with overgrown bushes. In the distance, the old discount store came into view, its faded sign barely holding on to the last of its paint. Keanu walked a few paces behind Evan, not crowding him, not rushing him, just giving him space to decide with each step whether he truly wanted help. Evan kept tightening his grip on the boxed lunches until the corners of the cardboard bent in his hands. He wanted to move faster and slower at the same time. Faster, so he could bring food to his mother. Slower, because the fear of what might happen when a stranger saw their situation pressed heavy against his ribs. They rounded the corner of the parking lot, where overgrown bushes formed a shield around the lone minivan. The morning sun reflected off the windshield, making it look deceptively warm inside. Evan quickened his pace, heart pounding from a mixture of worry and anticipation. He knocked gently on the window. "Mom, it's me." There was a rustle inside. A moment later, the passenger door opened with a creak. Lucia Morales appeared, wrapped in 2 blankets, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun that had fallen apart overnight. When her eyes shifted from Evan to the tall figure standing behind him, every muscle in her body stiffened. "Evan," she whispered urgently, "get inside." Evan froze. "Mom, it's okay. He's inside." "Evan," she repeated, her voice trembling. She looked at Keanu with a mix of fear and shame, her hands pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her breath hitched as she struggled to sit upright, trying desperately to look composed, even though her body betrayed her with every movement. Keanu stopped several steps away. He didn't move closer. He didn't raise his hands. He simply offered a soft, reassuring nod. "Mrs. Morales," he said gently, "my name is Keanu. I'm not here to scare you. Lucia swallowed hard, pain tightening her features. "Please," she said, her voice fragile, "don't call anyone. I can take care of my son. I can take care of us. We just need time." Her plea landed heavy in the quiet air. Keanu felt something twist inside him at the desperation in her voice. He had heard that tone before in shelters, in hospital hallways, in the stories of parents who feared losing the only thing keeping them alive. "I'm not here to take anything from you," Keanu said. His voice remained soft, almost careful. "I followed Evan because he said you hadn't eaten. I just want to help." Lucia's gaze dropped to the boxed lunches in Evan's hands. Her eyes filled with tears that she tried to blink away quickly. "You shouldn't have brought him here," she whispered to her son. "Strangers. Kindness. It always comes with something in return." Evan shook his head. "Mom, he helped. I couldn't carry everything alone." Keanu could see the shame radiating from her like heat. Not shame for being homeless, not shame for struggling. Shame because her illness had forced her child to become the protector. Keanu stepped slightly closer, still keeping a respectful distance. "If you need me to stay back, I will. But please know, I'm not here to judge you." Lucia's eyes fluttered shut, exhausted, and the fragile truth of their situation hung heavy between them. Lucia drew a shaky breath and attempted once more to sit straighter, as if dignity alone could hold her upright. The blanket slipped from her shoulder, revealing the swollen joints in her fingers. Her knuckles were red and inflamed, stiffened into unnatural angles from years of untreated autoimmune flares. She quickly pulled the blanket back up, hoping Keanu hadn't seen. But he had, and he understood more than she realized. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice barely holding itself together. "I just need a moment." Keanu knelt, not close but not far either. He positioned himself at her level, lowering his gaze so she didn't feel hovered over or cornered. Evan watched amazed. Most adults towered when they spoke to his mother, making her shrink even further. But Keanu made himself small, patient, grounded. It softened the tightness in the air. Lucia pressed her fingertips to her temples. "Please," she said again, quieter this time, "don't involve anyone. I've been through interviews, hearings, forms. Everything takes months. We're waiting for disability approval. I can work again once things calm down, I promise." Her voice broke on the last word. Keanu didn't interrupt. He let her speak until the truth poured out in trembling pieces. "My hands won't cooperate some days. I was a medical assistant for 8 years. I loved my job. I loved helping people. But I dropped tools. I made mistakes. Not dangerous ones, but enough for my supervisor to worry. The hospital asked if I could take a leave. Then the leave became early dismissal. After that, everything slipped. Rent, insurance, medicine." She paused as the weight of memory settled on her shoulders. "I tried to keep Evan in school, but you can't hide homelessness for long. He tried so hard. I tried even harder." Evan lowered his head, remembering those days too well. "We're not asking for anything," Lucia whispered. "I just need the chance to get back on my feet, to show them I'm still a good mother." Her voice cracked and tears streamed down her cheeks before she could stop them. She wiped them away with stiff fingers that barely bent. "Mom," Evan murmured. Lucia reached for him, but the movement sent a sharp jolt of pain through her wrist. She covered it quickly, not wanting him to see. Keanu felt something tug deep inside him, a feeling that rose from years of seeing people struggle alone. He thought of his own mother in their early days, stretching every dollar, fighting through hardship without asking for help, because asking felt like failure. He remembered how isolating that was, how heavy. He cleared his throat softly. "Lucia," he said, "I want you to know something. I'm not here because I pity you. I don't believe pity helps anyone. I'm here because your son cares about you with every part of himself, and because sometimes strong people need someone else to be strong with them." Lucia blinked, startled by the gentleness in his tone. Keanu continued speaking with quiet honesty. "I didn't grow up with much. I know what it feels like to be unsure of tomorrow. I know the fear of losing the only person who ever believed in you, and I know what it's like to be helped at just the right moment." The air shifted. Lucia's expression softened, her shoulders easing as if a small piece of the burden had lifted. Evan glanced between them, sensing the shift, but unsure what it meant. Keanu stayed in his kneeling position, waiting, breathing slowly, letting Lucia decide whether to trust him. For the first time, her fear began to loosen. Lucia wiped her face again, but this time the tears weren't just fear. Something gentler had entered her expression, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She looked at Evan, then back at Keanu, as if weighing a decision she wasn't sure she deserved to make. "I don't want my son growing up believing the world is only cruel," she whispered. "But every time someone offers help, there's a cost, and I don't have anything left to pay with." Keanu shook his head softly. "Not every kindness demands something in return. Some just ask that you accept it." Lucia let those words settle. For a moment she simply breathed, her trembling fingers smoothing the blanket on her lap. Evan touched her arm lightly, silently, asking her to trust him too. Keanu rose from his kneeling position just enough to speak more comfortably, though still not towering over her. "How about this?" he said gently. "Would you trust me enough to come with me for breakfast?" "Just food, nothing more." Lucia studied his face, searching for the trap she feared, but she found only patience and sincerity. Her shoulders weakened, her gaze softened. Finally, she nodded. "Breakfast? Yes, we can do that." The diner sat on a quiet corner just a few blocks from the plaza. Its windows fogged from the warmth inside. A small neon sign flickered softly, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted into the street. Keanu held the door open as Lucia stepped in, slowly leaning on Evan for support. For a moment she hesitated, as if afraid people might stare, but the morning crowd had thinned and the few customers inside barely looked up. A familiar voice called out from behind the counter. "Morning, hon? Back so soon?" It was Marlene, the older waitress, who had worked there for more than 20 years. She had sharp eyes, but they softened the moment she saw Lucia's trembling hands and Evan's thin frame. Without asking questions, she grabbed 3 menus and waved them toward a booth near the back. "This one's nice and quiet," she said. "Sit wherever feels comfortable." Lucia managed a small nod of gratitude before sliding into the booth. Evan followed wide-eyed at the stacks of pancakes he could see passing by on plates. Keanu sat opposite them, choosing the side closest to the aisle so Lucia wouldn't feel crowded. He rested his elbows gently on the table and offered a reassuring smile. "You're safe here," he said quietly. When Marlene returned with water and coffee, she took their orders with the same calm kindness she showed every regular. Evan tried to choose something simple, but Keanu nudged the menu closer. "Whatever you want," he said. "Really." Evan hesitated only a moment before ordering pancakes. Lucia requested toast, her voice apologetic, as if she was asking for too much. Keanu ordered a full breakfast plate, hoping she'd feel more comfortable eating if someone else did too. While they waited, Evan fidgeted with the edge of a napkin, trying to hide the way his stomach growled. Lucia noticed, and guilt flickered across her face. She whispered that he should slow down once the food came, but Keanu gently shook his head. "He doesn't need to pretend," he said softly. Lucia lowered her eyes. "I know, I don't want him to feel ashamed of being hungry." "There's no shame in needing help," Keanu replied. "There's only shame in ignoring someone who does." When the food arrived, Marlene placed an enormous stack of pancakes in front of Evan, along with extra syrup. The boy's eyes widened, and instinctively he reached for the fork, then paused. He looked at his mother first, as if seeking permission. She nodded gently, and Evan dug in, taking careful but eager bites. Lucia lifted a piece of toast to her mouth and froze. Tears welled up. Keanu noticed immediately. "Is something wrong?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "No. It's been a while since I could sit at a table with my son and eat real food." Her voice cracked, and she covered her mouth, trying to steady herself. Evan reached out and took her free hand, squeezing it warmly. Keanu watched the exchange, feeling the weight of everything they had endured pressing between them. "Take your time," he said gently. "You don't owe me any explanations." Lucia lowered her gaze, but her shoulders eased just a little as if those words alone lifted a burden she had carried for too long. Lucia took a slow breath, letting the warmth of the coffee cup steady her shaking hands. For the first time in weeks, she allowed her shoulders to relax. The booth felt safe, the food felt real, and the presence of someone who wasn't judging her gave her a moment of peace she hadn't realized she was desperate for. Keanu didn't push her to talk. He didn't rush her or fill the silence with empty words. He simply waited, giving her the dignity of choosing when her story would begin. Eventually, she set her toast down and folded her hands in her lap. "I wasn't always like this," she said quietly. "I worked in a hospital, long shifts, but I loved it. Helping people. It mattered to me." She paused, rubbing her swollen knuckles. Then the illness got worse. I couldn't grip tools, couldn't trust my hands. Some days I couldn't even walk without bracing against the wall. She looked up, her eyes glistening. "I tried to hide it for a long time. I thought if I just pushed harder I could get through it. But the body doesn't care how strong you think you are." Keanu nodded slowly. "Illness isn't weakness. That's not what my supervisor said." A bitter smile touched her lips. "She told me patients deserved someone steady, someone reliable, someone who wasn't broken." Evan stiffened beside her. "Mom, you're not broken." Keanu's gaze softened. "Your mother isn't defined by what she can't do right now. She's defined by everything she's still fighting for." Lucia looked down, her jaw trembling. "After they let me go, things fell apart fast. Rent, medical bills, prescriptions. It was too much. I applied for disability, but everything takes months, and we didn't have months. We barely had days." She wiped her cheek with a napkin. "I kept telling Evan things would get better. I didn't want him thinking we were sinking, but the truth is, I didn't know how to keep us afloat anymore." Evan swallowed hard and pushed his plate away, even though he wasn't finished. "You did everything you could." Lucia brushed his hair back gently. "I'm supposed to protect you, not the other way around." Keanu leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You're still protecting him. You've kept him safe, kept him alive. That takes strength most people never have to understand." She studied him carefully, as if trying to determine whether he meant it or was just being kind. But there was no pity in his eyes, no condescension, only sincerity. The moment felt fragile, like something inside her could finally break, or finally begin to heal. Then Keanu's phone buzzed. Lucia flinched. Her breathing quickened. "Who? Who are you calling? Please don't call anyone, please." Keanu held up his hands calmly. "It's okay. I'm not calling the police. I'm not calling social services. I promised you I wouldn't." Lucia's eyes darted toward the exit. "Then who?" "Someone I trust," Keanu said softly. "Someone who helps families in situations like yours. That's all." She shook her head, instinctively recoiling. "Help always comes with consequences. I can't risk losing Evan. I won't!" Keanu didn't argue. He waited for her panic to settle, then spoke in the same quiet tone. "You're not losing your son. Not today. Not ever because of me." Evan reached across the table and touched his mother's arm. "Mom, maybe it's okay." Her eyes wavered between fear and exhaustion, torn between protecting him and collapsing from the weight she carried. Keanu glanced toward the diner door. "She'll be here in a few minutes," he explained gently. "Her name is Angela Park. She works with a nonprofit I support. She's not here to take anything away from you. She's here to give options, real ones." Lucia swallowed hard. "And if I say no?" "Then she leaves," Keanu replied. "No pressure, no judgment. Just a meal shared between people who crossed paths at the right moment." Something in that promise steadied her. For the first time, uncertainty didn't feel deadly. It felt like the beginning of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. The bell above the diner door jingled, and a woman stepped inside with calm, purposeful steps. She carried a worn leather folder and wore a gentle expression that didn't hide how closely she was observing the room. Keanu lifted a hand, signaling her over. Lucia tensed, but Keanu leaned toward her. "This is Angela. She's here because I asked her, not because anyone reported you." Angela reached the table and offered Lucia a warm smile, not the practiced sympathy of a stranger, but the grounded warmth of someone who had seen suffering and refused to let it define people. "Lucia," Angela said softly, "I'm here to help you keep your family together. Nothing else." Lucia blinked, thrown by the simple clarity of the words. Help? How Angela opened her folder. Emergency housing, medical support, disability appeal assistance. "A temporary apartment today if you're willing." Lucia stared at her, speechless. Evan's breath caught. "That can't be real," Lucia whispered. "It's real," Angela said, "and it's available to you right now." Lucia's hand trembled as she pressed it to her chest. The fear, the hunger, the months of holding everything together alone finally broke open. Keanu spoke softly. "Let us help. You've been carrying the world by yourself long enough." Angela guided Lucia gently toward her car, keeping her pace slow so Lucia wouldn't feel rushed. Evan held onto his mother's sleeve until the very last moment, his fingers clinging, as if the space between them might swallow him whole. Lucia cupped his cheek, whispering that she would be back soon, but he still looked terrified. When Angela opened the passenger door, Evan stepped forward as if he might try to climb in with her. Keanu crouched beside him and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "your mom's not going anywhere without you. She's safe with Angela. I'll stay right here with you until she comes back." Evan swallowed hard. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "What if they change their minds? What if someone says she can't come back?" "They won't," Keanu said. "And I'll be here the whole time. You don't have to do this alone anymore." It took a few seconds for those words to settle. Evan finally nodded, though the fear in his eyes didn't fully fade. He stepped back from the car as Angela started the engine. Lucia waved weakly from the passenger seat, her fingers trembling against the window glass. The car pulled away slowly, turning at the corner until it disappeared. Evan stared after it until there was nothing left to see, as if waiting for the moment everything might fall apart. Keanu stayed beside him, patient and quiet. When Evan finally took a step back toward the diner, his shoulders slumped. "I've never been away from her this long," he said. Keanu nodded. "I can tell she's a good mother." "She is," Evan replied quickly. "She's the best, even when she's sick, even when she's tired. She tries so hard." His voice cracked and he blinked fast, trying to clear the moisture gathering in his eyes. Keanu gestured toward a bench just outside the diner. "Come sit with me. We can wait together." They sat side by side, the morning sun warm on the pavement. For a few minutes neither spoke. Evan clutched his torn backpack to his chest, the zipper jammed and the fabric frayed at the seams. Keanu noticed the wear, but didn't comment. He waited until Evan lifted his head and looked at him. "Why are you helping us?" Evan asked. "You don't even know us." Keanu leaned back slightly, letting the question settle. "When I was young," he said, "my mom and I moved around a lot. We didn't have much. Sometimes we stayed in rooms that didn't feel safe. Sometimes we didn't know where we'd sleep next." Evan blinked. But you're famous." Keanu smiled gently. "Fame didn't exist back then. I was just a kid trying to help my mom hold everything together. Some days were scary, some days were lonely, but every once in a while someone helped us. Small things, a hot meal, a room for the night, a person who treated us like we mattered." Evan looked down at his shoes. "Did it make a difference?" "It changed everything," Keanu said, "because it reminded me that we weren't invisible." The boy sat with that thought, his fingers tightening around the backpack straps. A breeze passed over them, carrying the faint scent of pancakes from the diner. For the first time that morning, Evan's shoulders eased just a little. "And that's why you're helping us?" he asked quietly. Keanu nodded. "Someone lifted me when I didn't know how to stand. Now it's my turn to lift someone else." Evan absorbed every word, his expression shifting from fear to something quieter, something almost like relief. He pulled his knees up slightly and rested his arms on them. "I didn't think anyone saw us," he murmured. "People walk past our van all the time. They don't even look." Keanu nodded slowly. "Sometimes people don't look because they don't know what to do. But that doesn't mean you're unseen." Evan looked down again, scuffing the toe of his shoe against the pavement. "I thought If I could just find enough cans or maybe some leftover sandwiches, Mom wouldn't feel so bad. I don't want her to think she failed." "Your mother didn't fail," Keanu said gently. "Life got hard, illness got harder. You've both been surviving the best you can." Evan didn't speak for a moment. When he finally lifted his head, his voice trembled. "She cries at night sometimes. She thinks I'm asleep, but I hear her. She thinks she ruined everything." Keanu's chest tightened. "She didn't ruin anything. She's fighting a battle most people never see. And you've been fighting it with her." The boy's throat bobbed as he swallowed. For the first time, he didn't try to hide the tears gathering in his eyes. He let them fall, wiping them with the back of his sleeve. "I just want her to get better." "I know," Keanu said softly. "And you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens next, we're walking through it together." Evan didn't answer, but he shifted closer just slightly, as if drawn to the quiet steadiness in Keanu's voice. They sat that way for several minutes, letting the weight of everything they'd been carrying settle between them, but for once, without crushing either of them. After a while, Evan turned his head toward the street. "Do you think she's okay?" "She is," Keanu assured him. "Angela knows what she's doing. She won't let your mom be pushed aside or forgotten." The reassurance seemed to calm him. Evan rested his chin on his knees. "I didn't think today would be like this. I just wanted to get a sandwich for her. That's all." "And you were willing to do whatever it took to take care of her," Keanu replied. "That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are." Evan looked surprised. "But I'm just... me." "That's enough," Keanu said warmly. "More than enough." They fell into silence again, but this time it felt different. Lighter. As if something fragile inside Evan had finally found room to breathe. A few cars passed by on the street. The sun climbed a little higher. Somewhere behind them, Marlene stepped out of the diner to shake crumbs from a tablecloth, giving Keanu a knowing nod before heading back in. Everything moved in slow, gentle rhythms. Then at last, Evan stiffened. "That's Angela's car," he whispered. Keanu stood and Evan jumped to his feet so quickly he nearly stumbled. The car pulled to the curb and Angela stepped out first. Lucia followed carefully, holding a small white envelope in her trembling hands. Even from across the sidewalk, Evan could see the shine of metal keys inside. "Mom," he called out, barely breathing the word. Lucia looked up. Her face broke open, not with fear or shame, but with a soft, stunned joy she didn't know how to contain. She raised the envelope weakly, her eyes brimming. "I have keys," she whispered. "Evan, we have keys." The boy ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist. She held him as if she couldn't believe any of it was real. Angela stood quietly beside them, giving them space, letting them feel the magnitude of the moment. Keanu approached slowly, not wanting to intrude, but Lucia reached a hand toward him. Her fingers trembled. How she asked, "How is this happening?" Lucia held the small envelope against her chest as if it were something fragile, something holy. Evan clung to her side, eyes wide with wonder, unable to stop staring at the glint of metal keys through the paper. It felt impossible that something so small could mean survival, safety, and dignity all at once. Angela stood beside them with a gentle smile. "It's a temporary apartment," she explained. "A safe place while we work on your disability, appeal your medical support, and long-term housing. You can move in today." Lucia shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. "I don't understand." "Why us?" Keanu stepped closer, his voice quiet and steady. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't know where to go. Someone saw me when life felt impossible, and they gave me a chance that changed everything." He met her eyes with sincerity that left no room for doubt. "Now it's my turn." Lucia's breath trembled. Evan pressed his face into her side, trying to hide how hard he was crying. Keanu rested a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "You're not alone anymore." Lucia closed her eyes, letting the truth of those words sink deep. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel dangerous. It felt real. Angela drove slowly through the residential streets, turning into a modest apartment complex with pale stucco walls and neatly trimmed hedges. The buildings weren't fancy, but they looked cared for, the kind of place where people tried to rebuild their lives quietly and with dignity. As the car rolled to a stop, Evan pressed his hands against the window, hardly daring to believe this was for them. Lucia stepped out carefully, still shaky from the morning's emotions. Angela guided them toward a ground-floor unit with a sturdy metal door and a small welcome mat that someone from the nonprofit must have placed earlier. Evan stared at the mat as if it were a symbol of something bigger than hospitality. In many ways it was. Angela unlocked the door and pushed it open. The hinges gave a soft sigh and warm air drifted out. Evan stepped in first, stopping just past the threshold. For a long moment he didn't move. He simply looked. There were real walls, real windows, a small living room with carpet that didn't smell like mildew, a kitchen counter that wasn't covered in dust or fast food wrappers, a hallway leading to 2 small rooms, everything clean, everything intact, everything theirs. Lucia moved forward slowly, her breath catching in her throat. She placed her hand against the closest wall, closing her eyes as if grounding herself in something solid for the first time in months. "It's warm," she whispered. "The walls are warm." Evan wandered from room to room, running his fingers along the window frames, opening cupboard doors, flicking light switches, just to see the brightness fill the room. He touched the kitchen faucet, then the doorknob, then the corner of the carpet. Over and over, he reached out, half expecting everything to vanish the moment he blinked. Angela smiled softly. "It's not much, but it's safe. Heat works, water's good. The mattresses are new, and it's yours for as long as you need while we get you settled." Lucia covered her mouth with both hands. Tears welled up again, quiet tears, the kind that come when a person finally lets themselves believe safety is possible. "A home," she whispered. "We have a home again." Evan heard her voice tremble and ran back to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She held him tightly, her fingers threading through his hair. For months, she had lived in fear that she was failing him, that she was dragging him down with her illness. In this small apartment, that crushing fear began to loosen its grip. They were still holding each other when footsteps approached the open door. Keanu appeared carrying 2 large grocery bags in each hand. He offered a warm smile, but didn't speak right away. He set the bags gently on the kitchen counter, moving slowly, respectfully, as if aware that he was entering a sacred moment. Evan wiped his face quickly, pretending he wasn't crying. Keanu didn't comment. He simply gave the boy's shoulder a gentle squeeze as he passed. Lucia steadied herself. "You brought groceries," she whispered, overwhelmed. Keanu nodded softly. "Just a few things to get you started." His tone held no pressure, no insistence, only quiet care. Evan looked at the bags, then at Keanu, then at the apartment around them. For the second time that day, hope pressed against his ribs so hard it almost hurt. And this time, he didn't try to hide it. Keanu began unpacking the grocery bags with the calm focus of someone who understood that even ordinary actions could carry deep meaning. He placed a carton of eggs gently in the refrigerator, followed by fresh vegetables, sandwich bread, and a pack of chicken broth he'd chosen after remembering how weak Lucia's voice had sounded earlier. He moved with quiet purpose, as if each item were more than food, as if it were a message: you are worthy of care. Evan hovered nearby, watching him. At first he didn't move, unsure if he should help or stay out of the way. But when Keanu handed him a small bag of apples with a soft smile, Evan stepped forward and placed them carefully into the crisper drawer. "Good choice," Keanu said. "These will last a while." Evan nodded, proud of the simple task. For months, every action he took had been tied to survival. Finding cans, rationing food, protecting his mother. Helping stock a real refrigerator felt almost unreal. Angela walked through the apartment with Lucia explaining each small detail. The heater's efficient. The bathroom was renovated last year. And the windows lock properly so you'll feel safe. When they reached the bathroom, Lucia froze. The room wasn't large, but it was clean and bright. A full bathtub stretched along the wall, its porcelain surface shining under the overhead light. To most people, it would be an ordinary tub. But to Lucia, who had spent months washing with wipes or cold water from sinks, it was something extraordinary. She stepped inside slowly and touched the metal faucet with trembling fingers. A soft sob escaped her, sudden and sharp. She covered her mouth, trying to muffle it, but more tears poured through her fingers. Angela placed a gentle hand on her back. "It's okay," she said. "Let it out." Lucia gripped the edge of the tub, overwhelmed by the sight of so much normalcy. "I used to take baths when my joints hurt," she whispered. "It helped me get through my shifts. I haven't had that in so long." She bowed her head, crying into her hands, deep, shaking breaths that had been trapped in her chest for months. Angela stayed with her quietly, asking nothing, demanding nothing, simply standing beside her until the storm of emotion softened. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Evan tried to stay composed, but the more Keanu unpacked granola bars, oatmeal vitamins, a jar of honey, the more Evan felt something rising in his throat. His eyes burned and he blinked hard, desperate not to break down in front of the man who had already done so much. Keanu noticed the way the boy kept turning his face away. He didn't call attention to it. He didn't ask questions. He simply placed a hand on Evan's shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You don't have to be strong every minute," Keanu said softly. "It's okay to breathe now." Evan lowered his head. A few silent tears fell onto the tiled floor. He wiped them quickly, but Keanu pretended not to notice. The kitchen hummed with a quiet tenderness, a space where neither of them had to say everything they felt. After the groceries were put away, Keanu set a paper bag on the small table near the window. Inside were notebooks, pencils, markers, and a reading lamp with a warm, amber glow. Evan approached the table slowly, almost reverently. "What's all this?" he asked. "For when you go back to school," Keanu said. "A fresh start needs a place to learn." Evan lifted one of the notebooks, flipping through the untouched pages. For the first time in months, he could imagine himself sitting at that table, studying, drawing, dreaming. A place not just to survive, but to grow. Lucia stepped out of the hallway just then, her eyes still red but her face calmer. She reached out and touched the living room wall again, letting her fingers slide along the smooth surface. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." She said it like a prayer, a fragile, grateful prayer rising from someone who had lived too long without a place to rest. Lucia walked slowly into the living room, her hand brushing the wall again, as if confirming it was real each time she touched it. Evan followed close behind her, still holding the notebook he had picked up. The apartment felt quiet, but not the lonely silence of their old nights in the van. This silence was warm, safe. It wrapped around them like a blanket they had forgotten they deserved. Keanu stood near the kitchen watching them both, with gentle patience. He didn't rush the moment. He didn't tell them how to feel. He simply let them exist in a place that finally offered peace. Evan placed the notebook on the small study table and flicked on the lamp. The amber light glowed softly, filling the corner with warmth. He stared at it, absorbing the idea that this spot was his. A place to sit, a place to learn, a place to belong. Lucia sank onto the edge of the couch, covering her mouth with both hands. Her shoulders trembled. I thought we would never have this again." Keanu stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady. "You deserve this, both of you." Lucia closed her eyes, whispering one last time, "Thank you." This time, the words carried hope, not fear. Lucia sat in the passenger seat of Angela's car, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The envelope containing their new apartment keys rested between her fingers, and she kept glancing down at it, as if afraid it might disappear. The drive to the clinic was only 10 minutes, but she spent most of it trying to steady her breathing. Everything was happening faster than she could process. One morning, she had been waking up in a cold van, aching and unsure how to keep her son fed. Now she was being taken to a medical clinic by a woman who spoke to her like she mattered. When they arrived, Angela guided her through the entrance with gentle confidence. The lobby was small but bright, filled with posters about chronic illnesses, support groups, and nutrition programs. The receptionist greeted them warmly and handed Lucia a clipboard of paperwork. Lucia hesitated before signing anything, but Angela stayed beside her, explaining each part in simple terms that eased her fear. After a short wait, a specialist in autoimmune disorders welcomed them into an exam room. The doctor spoke to Lucia with a firmness that felt reassuring rather than intimidating. He asked detailed questions about her symptoms, her flare-ups, her medication lapses, and the worsening swelling in her joints. When she explained that she had been stretching pills to make them last. The doctor didn't scold her. Instead, he nodded with understanding. "You've been doing the best you can," he said, "but you shouldn't be carrying this alone." He adjusted her medications, prescribing a stabilizing treatment plan and scheduling weekly physical therapy sessions to help her regain strength in her hands and legs. He assured her that with proper care, her condition could become far more manageable. "You are not beyond recovery," he told her. "You just need medical support, rest, and stability." Lucia felt an unexpected wave of emotion swell in her chest. For so long, every doctor's visit had ended with discouraging news or reminders of what she couldn't afford. This was the first time someone had spoken to her about a future that wasn't bleak. Angela gathered the prescriptions and exit papers while Lucia steadied herself against the counter. "You're going to get better," Angela said softly. "This is the first real step." Meanwhile, at the apartment, Keanu stayed with Evan. The boy was quiet at first, unsure of what to do in a place that wasn't temporary. But Keanu made space for him, never overwhelming, never pushing. Together, they opened the worn plastic bag that held the last of their belongings. 2 changes of clothes, a library book they hadn't been able to return, a broken toy car Evan had kept since he was little, and some folded papers Lucia always carried for job or assistance applications. "We don't have much," Evan muttered. "You have each other," Keanu replied. "Everything else can be rebuilt." As they unpacked, a knock sounded at the door. A delivery driver handed Evan a thin envelope with his name on it. Inside was a letter from the local middle school welcoming him and listing his new schedule. Evan stared at the paper for a long time. His name was there printed clearly, and beneath it was an address, a real address, his address. His mouth fell open slightly as if he wasn't sure how to react. Keanu noticed. "That looks pretty official." "It has my name," Evan whispered. "And our apartment number, like we live somewhere again." He pressed the paper to his chest, holding it like something precious. Evan was still clutching the schedule when the apartment door opened again. He turned quickly, heart racing for a moment before realizing it was his mother. She stepped inside slowly, and for the first time in months, she wasn't hunched over in pain. Her movements were careful, but steadier, supported by the new medication already easing the inflammation in her joints. "Mom?" Evan breathed, rushing to her side. "How did it go?" Lucia smiled, a real smile, small and watery, but alive. "The doctor thinks I can get stronger again. He adjusted my medicine, and Angela helped me set up appointments." She paused, overwhelmed. "They didn't treat me like I was a burden. They treated me like a person." Keanu watched from the kitchen doorway, his hands resting against the counter. He had spent the last hour cleaning their pots and plates, organizing the pantry, with a neatness that felt like respect rather than charity. He didn't interrupt. He simply let mother and son share their moment. Evan tugged her toward the kitchen. "Look what we did." "The cabinets close right, Mom. And the fridge, look, it actually hums." Lucia took it all in slowly. The groceries, the swept floor, the tidy countertop. The school supplies neatly arranged on the little table by the window, and her son smiling in a way she had thought she might never see again. Emotion rose in her throat too fast to stop. She turned suddenly and wrapped her arms around Keanu. The hug caught him off guard, and for a second his hands hovered awkwardly in the air before resting gently on her back. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to say it any other way." "You don't have to," Keanu replied softly. "You just focus on healing. We'll take the rest one step at a time." Angela entered behind Lucia, holding a folder filled with forms. "The next step is applying for permanent housing assistance," she explained. "It's a process, but now you have the documentation, and you're in a safe place while we do the work. You won't be navigating this alone." For a long moment, Lucia stood in the center of the small living room, turning slowly, as if memorizing every inch the carpet under her feet, the light through the blinds, the 2 plates drying near the sink. Evan wrapped his arms around her waist again. She leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "We can do this," she said, almost to herself. "We really can." For the first time in many months, she believed those words, and Keanu, watching them with quiet pride, knew this was only the beginning. A full week passed, and for the first time in months, Lucia felt her body begin to loosen from the constant coil of pain and fear. The new medication steadied her joints. The apartment gave her rest. The certainty of food removed a weight she had carried for too long. And Evan, with his school schedule tucked carefully into his backpack each morning, grew lighter in spirit by the day. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the apartment building and painted the balconies in warm amber light, they heard the familiar rumble of a motorcycle pulling into the lot. Evan rushed to the window with a grin he didn't bother hiding. "It's him," he said. "He's here." Lucia opened the door just as Keanu climbed the stairs carrying a paper bag filled with takeout containers. The scent of noodles and sesame wafted through the air. He offered a small wave, humble as always. "Thought I'd bring dinner," he said. "Heard someone has a weakness for chow mein." Evan's cheeks flushed. "It's really good," he admitted, shy but excited. Keanu stepped inside, removing his boots by the door out of habit. He set the food on the kitchen counter, and Evan began opening containers eagerly while Lucia prepared plates. They ate together on the tiny balcony, the city sounds drifting softly from below. Cars hummed by children played in the courtyard, and a warm breeze rustled the potted plant on the railing. A plant Evan had watered daily, as if it were proof the apartment was truly theirs. For a few minutes they ate quietly, enjoying the simple comfort of a shared meal. Eventually, Lucia set her chopsticks down and looked at Keanu with a mix of curiosity and gratitude. "Can I ask you something?" she said gently. "Of course," Keanu replied. Lucia hesitated, searching for the right words. "Someone like you, with your life, your work, your fame, why do you help people privately like this? No cameras, no announcements, just showing up." Keanu leaned back in his chair, letting the evening air cool the sweat from his ride. He took a thoughtful breath before answering. "I've never been comfortable with big displays," he said. "I grew up with a lot of uncertainty. My mom and I moved often, and life wasn't always steady. When people helped us back then, it wasn't because they wanted recognition. They just cared. That kind of kindness stays with you." Lucia listened intently, her eyes softening. "I support some nonprofits," Keanu continued, "small ones like Angela's, programs that meet people where they are, quietly, without making anyone feel like a statistic. I've always believed that the best kind of help is the kind that gives someone space to breathe again." Evan rested his chin on the balcony railing, absorbing every word. Those words felt true to him, deeply true, because he had lived the difference between pity and genuine care. Lucia folded her hands together. "I never expected anyone to show up for us," she whispered. "Especially not someone like you." Keanu shook his head gently. "Someone like me is just someone who remembers what it's like to struggle." Her breath trembled. She looked away for a moment, trying to steady herself. Lucia didn't speak at first. She stared out over the courtyard, where a few children rode second-hand bikes in crooked circles. Their laughter drifted upward, mixing with the soft hum of the city. She clasped her hands together, the faint tremor in her fingers returning as memories rose uninvited. "I felt like I failed him," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every night in that van, I lay awake wondering how much more he could endure. I prayed he wouldn't get sick. I prayed he wouldn't grow bitter or lose hope. And every morning when he climbed out to collect cans, I felt like the worst mother alive because I couldn't stop him." Evan froze, noodle container in hand. He lowered it slowly, his gaze fixed on the balcony floor. Keanu turned toward Lucia, not with pity, but with a steady compassion that invited honesty. "You didn't fail him," he said. "You held on when most people would have collapsed. You protected him with everything you had left." Lucia shook her head quickly. "But I couldn't feed him. I couldn't keep him warm. I couldn't give him anything a mother is supposed to give." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away with frustration rather than weakness. What kind of parent lets their child dig through dumpsters just so they can eat? Evan stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Mom, I never thought you failed me. Not once. She looked at him in surprise, as if she hadn't expected him to speak. You did everything you could, Evan said. You never gave up on me. You never made me feel like I was alone. Even when we were scared, you kept telling me we'd make it. That mattered more than anything. Lucia covered her mouth as a sob escaped her. Evan wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. For a moment, their breathing synced the rise and fall of two people who had survived far more than they ever spoke aloud. Keanu let them have the moment. When Lucia finally lifted her head, her eyes were red but clearer. What Evan needs isn't perfection, Keanu said softly. He needs love. He needs someone who fights for him even on the hardest days. You've given him that in ways you don't even see. Evan nodded against his mother's shoulder. He's right. Lucia leaned back into her chair, exhausted, but lighter. I just wanted him to have a chance, she whispered. And now he does, Keanu replied. Because of you. The evening breeze picked up again, rustling the takeout bags and carrying away the heaviness that had pressed on them all week. The balcony, small and worn as it was, felt like a sacred space where guilt loosened, where truth surfaced, where healing finally began. Evan wiped his face and sat beside Keanu, their shoulders touching lightly. A bond had formed there, a quiet, profound trust that none of them had expected, but all of them needed. Evan's first day of school arrived quietly, without ceremony, without new clothes or shiny backpacks. But for him, it felt like stepping into an entirely new world. He woke up early, long before sunrise, unable to sleep from a mixture of nerves and excitement. Lucia helped him smooth his hair and pack his simple lunch. Her hands were still tender from inflammation, but steadier than they had been in months, thanks to the new medication and the comfort of a real bed. You'll do great, she whispered, kissing the top of his head. Just be yourself. Evan nodded, though his stomach twisted with nerves. For years, his education had been inconsistent. Changing schools, missing days to care for his mother, or being too exhausted after long nights in the van had become normal. This was the first time in a long time he walked into a classroom as a kid who wasn't hiding his homelessness. When he arrived, the hallways buzzed with chatter and slamming lockers. Children moved in clusters, laughing, comparing schedules, trading stories about their weekends. Evan stood still for a moment, gripping the straps of his worn backpack, unsure where to fit in. A group of boys glanced at him, their eyes landing briefly on his faded shoes and patchwork jacket. They didn't say anything cruel, but they didn't smile either. In homeroom, a girl asked casually, "Where'd you move from?" Her voice wasn't unkind, just curious. Evan hesitated. He couldn't say the back of a van behind an abandoned store. So he shrugged. Across town. The girl nodded and turned back to her notebook, but the question lingered in his mind all morning. He felt eyes on him now and then. Not judgmental, just curious. Still, it made him sink deeper into his seat. But something unexpected happened. His teachers were kind. His reading teacher, Ms. Harlow, noticed how quickly he absorbed stories, how he traced every word with a hunger that had nothing to do with academics alone. His science teacher praised his problem solving. His homeroom teacher placed him near the window where sunlight warmed the desk, a small gesture that he appreciated more than she could know. By the end of the week, the counselor invited him to join an after-school reading club. Evan hesitated. At first, he didn't think he was good enough, but when he walked into the library the following Tuesday, something changed in him. The quiet, the warm lamps, the rows of books that smelled like pages and possibility brought a peace he hadn't felt in years. He sat at a table with 3 other kids, each reading their own novel. No one asked where he came from. No one questioned his shoes. They simply nodded in greeting, and that tiny gesture felt like being welcomed home. Meanwhile, Lucia's days began filling with a new routine of physical therapy sessions and check-ins with Angela. Her strength was returning slowly. She could grip a mug without pain. She could climb stairs without stopping halfway. Each small victory made her feel more like herself again. And through it all, Keanu checked in quietly, never making himself the center of the story, never asking for praise. Sometimes he dropped off groceries. Sometimes he brought Lucia vitamins or cooked a meal. Other times he simply knocked on the door to see how they were doing. Evan looked forward to those visits more than he admitted. As the weeks settled into a steady rhythm, Evan began finding his footing in ways he hadn't imagined possible. School no longer felt like a foreign country. He still flinched when kids asked questions about his past, but little by little he learned that most of them weren't trying to pry, they were simply curious. And with each passing day, the weight of hiding everything grew lighter. One afternoon, after reading club let out, Angela arrived at the school to drop off flyers for a community event. She spotted Evan kneeling beside a younger student whose backpack zipper had broken. Evan tried fixing it with careful fingers, determined not to let the child walk home with their belongings spilling everywhere. Angela watched quietly until Evan finally looked up. "You're good at helping," she said with a smile. Evan blushed. "I just know what it feels like when things go wrong. That's exactly why you're needed." A few days later, she invited him to volunteer at the nonprofit's food distribution program. Evan was nervous. He wasn't sure he belonged anywhere outside school or home. But Lucia encouraged him. "Try it," she said. "Helping others might help you too." So that Saturday, Evan rode with Angela to the community center. The parking lot buzzed with families waiting for groceries, clean clothes, hygiene kits, and shoes. Evan's heart pounded, but when Angela placed a box in his hands and pointed toward the distribution line, something steadied inside him. He carried crates of canned goods, sorted donations, and handed out children's jackets. Every thank you made him stand taller. Every smile passed between them felt like a small thread, stitching him into something bigger than himself. At one point, a little girl tugged at his sleeve. Her curly hair was frizzy and her cheeks smudged with dust. She held up 2 shirts and whispered, "Which one will make me look nice at school?" Evan knelt down, remembering exactly how it felt to wonder if anyone would take you seriously based on the clothes you wore. He smiled gently. "This one," he said, pointing to the shirt with tiny blue stars. "You'll look great in it." Her grin stretched ear to ear. When Angela saw him later, she noticed the quiet confidence growing in his posture. "You're good at this," she said again, more firmly this time. Evan shrugged, but he couldn't stop smiling. "I want to do what Keanu does," he told her. "He helped us. I want to help people too." That evening, when he told his mother the same thing, Lucia felt her heart swell so fully she had to sit down. She cupped his face gently. "You already are," she whispered. And for the first time, Evan believed her. Lucia had spent so many months shrinking her world down to survival that she hardly knew how to react when things finally began moving forward. Angela worked tirelessly on her disability appeal, gathering medical records, employer statements, and documentation from the clinic. Every step felt like a mountain. Lucia wasn't sure she could climb, but Angela guided her through each form, each requirement, each meeting with the calm certainty of someone who believed in her. One morning, Angela arrived at the apartment with a visiting nurse. Lucia's first instinct was embarrassment. The idea of someone examining her swollen joints, her weakened muscles, her trembling hands made her cheeks heat with shame. But the nurse spoke to her with a warmth that dissolved some of that discomfort. She explained her condition in simple terms, outlining how inflammation had restricted her mobility and how treatment could gradually restore strength and flexibility. It wasn't a promise of a cure, but a path. And for the first time in a long time, the path didn't feel impossible. With consistent therapy, the nurse said gently, "There's a good chance you can return to part-time nursing in a few months. Your skills haven't disappeared. They've just been waiting for your body to catch up." Lucia blinked at her, startled. The idea of returning to the work she loved felt unreal. Nursing had once been more than a job to her. It had been purpose. It had been pride. It had been her way of contributing to a world she cared about. Losing it had taken a piece of her identity. Hearing she might regain that piece made her heart ache with a mix of longing and fear. After the nurse left, Angela squeezed Lucia's shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not doing this alone anymore." A few days later, Lucia went to her physical therapy session, feeling nervous but determined. She wore one of her older work sweaters, hoping it made her look more put together than she felt. When she walked into the therapy room, she froze. Keanu was already there, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets. "You didn't have to come," she said quickly, flustered. "I know," he replied softly, "but I wanted to." His presence steadied her in a way she hadn't expected. As the therapist guided her through stretches and resistance exercises, Lucia felt the familiar burn of effort ripple through her muscles. It was uncomfortable, humbling, and at moments discouraging. Her legs trembled under her weight. Her fingers couldn't grip the therapy bands as tightly as she wished. Sweat gathered along her hairline, and frustration crept into her chest. "I used to lift patients twice my size," she muttered, breathless. "Now, look at me." "You're here," Keanu said calmly. "That's what matters." The therapist encouraged her through another set. Lucia winced but pushed forward. Each repetition felt like reclaiming a fragment of the person she used to be. When she finally rested, wiping her forehead with a towel, she let out a shaky laugh. "Maybe you should become a motivational coach," she teased. "You're unusually good at this." Keanu laughed with her. "I'm not sure the world needs that from me." But his voice held a softness that lingered long after the joke faded. After the session, Lucia and Keanu walked slowly toward the parking lot. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and Lucia felt the lingering burn in her muscles, a reminder that she had worked harder than she thought she could. She leaned on the railing for a moment, catching her breath, the cool air filling her lungs. "I didn't expect it to be this hard," she admitted quietly. Keanu nodded. "Hard doesn't mean impossible." Lucia glanced down at her hands. The swelling was still visible, but not as severe as before. The medication was helping. The exercises were helping, and somewhere deeper, something else was helping too. Support, presence, belief. They reached Angela's car, and Lucia paused before getting in. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, her voice tentative. "Of course. I spent months feeling like I was disappearing," she said. "Every day was about surviving the next hour, keeping Evan fed, keeping him warm, trying not to show him how scared I really was. I didn't let myself imagine anything beyond that, because hope felt dangerous. If I hoped and things still fell apart, I wasn't sure I could survive it." Keanu listened with complete attention, his expression open and sincere. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix her words, he simply received them. Lucia continued, her voice trembling at the edges. "These last weeks, they've reminded me of who I used to be. A nurse who cared deeply. A woman who believed she could build a better life for her son. I thought she was gone forever." She swallowed hard. "But today, for the first time, I felt her again." Keanu stepped a little closer. "She was never gone," he said gently. "She was exhausted. She was hurting. But she never stopped fighting." Lucia smiled, though tears filled her eyes. "You make it sound like I'm stronger than I am." "You are," Keanu replied. "Stronger than you know." A quiet moment settled between them. Cars passed by in the distance. A child laughed somewhere near the building. The world felt suddenly gentle. Lucia looked down, brushing away a tear with the edge of her sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here, for not treating me like a charity case, for seeing me." Keanu shook his head softly. "You're not a charity case. You're a person who deserved help long before I showed up, and you're still the one doing the hard work." She exhaled slowly, letting that truth settle into her bones. It felt grounding. It felt real. "Hope is a stubborn thing," Keanu said quietly, as if sharing something he had learned the hard way. "It shows up even when we think we don't deserve it. Sometimes it shows up in people. Sometimes in moments. Sometimes in a second chance." Lucia's breath caught. For the first time in many months, she didn't push hope away. She let it stay. 2 months passed, and with each week, Lucia grew a little steadier on her feet. Her therapy sessions helped her rebuild strength in her hands and legs. The clinic adjusted her medication again, bringing her relief she had once believed impossible. Evan thrived in school, joining the reading club, making a few quiet friends, and continuing to volunteer with Angela at the food distribution center. Their lives were not perfect, but they were no longer balancing on the edge of collapse. For the first time in a long time, they were standing on solid ground. Then one crisp morning, a white envelope arrived in the mailbox outside their apartment. Lucia retrieved it on her way back from therapy, expecting another medical bill or appointment reminder. But when she saw the sender printed in monochrome type across the top, her heart lurched. It was from the State Disability Office. Her hands trembled as she climbed the stairs. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and called out for Evan. The boy rushed from his room, still wearing his school lanyard from earlier that day. "What is it?" he asked, breathless. Lucia didn't answer right away. She tore open the envelope, with shaking fingers unfolded the letter and began reading silently. Her eyes raced across the text, widening with each line. Her breath quickened. And then suddenly her body sagged, as if something heavy had slipped off her shoulders. "Mom," Evan whispered. Lucia pressed a hand over her mouth. Tears welled, then spilled freely. She took a shaky breath and forced herself to read the words aloud. "They approved my disability benefits," she said. "Evan, we're approved." Evan stared at her for a moment, as if waiting for the rest of the sentence, waiting for a catch, a warning, a disappointment like so many they had received before. But Lucia's voice didn't break. Her hands didn't falter. The words were real. The approval was real. "What does that mean?" he asked quietly. "It means stability," Lucia said. "It means we can pay rent. It means medication. It means groceries without panic. It means we're safe, sweetheart. We're safe." Evan lunged into her arms, holding her tightly. The letter crinkled between them, pressed against his cheek. Lucia kissed the top of his head, her tears dropping into his hair as relief poured through her like warm sunlight. They stayed like that for a long moment, letting the truth sink in. The world had not given them much in the past 2 years, but today it gave them something precious, a future. Later that afternoon, Angela arrived with more news. She had secured a subsidized 2-bedroom apartment closer to Evan's school and within walking distance of Lucia's therapy center. The new building was modern, safe, and surrounded by a friendly neighborhood. For once, everything aligned in their favor. "This doesn't happen often," Angela said softly. "But when it does, it changes everything." Lucia pressed a hand over her heart. It already has. Moving day arrived with clear skies and a calm breeze, the kind of weather that felt like a blessing rather than an accident. Lucia stood outside the old apartment with a mixture of gratitude and anticipation. This small place had been their refuge, a stepping stone that had given them time to breathe again. But the new apartment represented something deeper. It represented permanence. It represented dignity. It represented the life she had once believed was gone forever. Evan bounded down the stairs carrying a box labeled books, his smile brighter than the morning sun. "Mom, the new building has a courtyard," he said excitedly, "and a bench under a tree. I can read there after school." Lucia laughed softly. "Then that's where I'll find you." Before she could pick up her own box, she saw someone walking toward them from the parking lot. The familiar black motorcycle jacket, the easy stride, the warm, unassuming smile. Keanu had shown up. "You didn't think I'd miss moving day, did you?" he said, lifting a hand in greeting. Lucia's shoulders dropped in relief. "You've already done so much. You didn't have to come." He shook his head. "No one should move alone. Besides, I owe Evan a rematch in who can carry the heaviest box." Evan lit up. "You're definitely losing. I've been training." Keanu chuckled and headed toward the stack of boxes. Before Lucia could protest, he hoisted the heaviest one onto his shoulder with surprising ease. "This one goes first," he said. "Lead the way." They caravanned to the new apartment building, a modest but welcoming structure, painted in warm beige tones. Flower beds lined the entrance, and the gentle hum of a fountain filled the courtyard. Lucia inhaled deeply. The place smelled of fresh paint, clean hallways, and possibility. Angela met them at the front door, clipboard in hand. "Welcome home," she said, her voice full of pride. Evan rushed inside, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. The apartment was small, but bright, with sunlight spilling through wide windows. There was a living room with space for a couch, they didn't have yet. A tiny dining area and 2 bedrooms, one for Lucia, one for Evan. It felt like heaven. Lucia set her purse on the counter and placed a hand flat on the smooth kitchen surface. She didn't say anything. She didn't trust her voice not to break. Keanu carried in the next box, setting it gently on the floor. When he saw her standing there silently, he paused. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "This doesn't feel real." "It is," he said. "And you deserve this." Angela began helping Evan unpack, organizing his school supplies on a new desk placed under the window. Evan looked around in wonder, as if memorizing every corner. When the last box was brought in, they all sat together on the clean floor in the living room. Evan opened a pizza box Angela had brought, and they ate slices cross-legged, laughing about who had carried what and how Keanu had nearly lost his balance the moment Evan bragged about his training. The room echoed with warmth and lightness, something their lives had lacked for so long that the sound of laughter felt like a gift. Lucia watched Evan joke with Keanu, her heart swelling with gratitude deeper than words. For months, she had lived in fear. Now she watched her son glow with joy. In the months that followed the move, something remarkable began to happen around Evan. What had started as a quiet transformation inside him slowly spread into the world he touched. His teachers noticed it first. Evan was the kid who stayed after class to stack chairs, the one who offered his pencil to a student who forgot theirs, the one who held the door for classmates without expecting a thank you. Word traveled quickly, not because Evan ever talked about himself, but because kindness has a way of echoing louder than anything else in a school hallway. Soon teachers learned that he volunteered every week at Angela's nonprofit. Some of them asked him about it during lunch or after school. Evan would shrug shyly, not wanting to sound proud. "They helped us," he would say. "So, I helped too." One afternoon, while picking up Evan from school, Keanu noticed a flyer taped to a bulletin board near the office. It listed items students sometimes struggled to afford: soap deodorant, clean socks, toothpaste. The flyer was titled "Things We Wish We Could Ask For," and something about it tugged at him. When Evan walked out, backpack bouncing against his shoulders, Keanu showed him the flyer. "Do kids really need this?" he asked gently. Evan nodded. "Some do. They get embarrassed to ask." Keanu folded the paper in half, thinking, what if we made a way for them to get these things without having to ask? Evan's eyes widened. Like what? "Maybe a small closet at school," Keanu said. "A place where students can take what they need quietly." Evan considered it, imagining shelves stocked with basics that could change someone's day. He remembered how humiliating it had been to go without things other kids took for granted. That feeling stayed with him. Now he could help someone else avoid it. "I want to do it," he said firmly. "Can we?" Keanu smiled. "We can." With the principal's blessing and Angela's help, they set up a small storage space near the counselor's office. Inside, they placed bins of travel-size shampoo, soap bars, toothbrushes, socks, and deodorant. Evan labeled everything carefully, making sure the items were arranged in a way that felt discreet. The students didn't have to ask permission. They simply walked in, took what they needed, and left with their dignity intact. When the kindness closet opened, teachers praised the idea. But Evan didn't care about praise. What mattered to him was the small smile he noticed when a boy retrieved a pair of socks without drawing attention, or the relieved expression on a girl's face when she took a hygiene kit before gym class. He never pointed it out. He never told anyone. He just kept the shelves stocked and the door open. Meanwhile, Lucia's progress continued. With months of therapy behind her and her medication fully adjusted, her strength returned in noticeable ways. Her hands could now grip medical instruments without tremors. Her legs supported her without constant pain. When a local clinic offered her a part-time position, assisting with patient intake and basic care, she accepted with a joy so profound she cried on the phone with Angela for nearly a minute before she could speak. Working again made her feel whole. Being able to contribute to help others rekindled the spark she had lost long before the van, long before the collapse of everything she once knew. Each day she returned home tired, but it was the good kind of tired the kind filled with purpose. As Lucia settled into her new routine at the clinic, the atmosphere in their new apartment shifted. There was laughter in the evenings, the clatter of dinner plates, and quiet conversations about school and work. Evan did his homework at the small desk by the window, and Lucia reviewed patient charts or therapy notes beside him. Life was still humble, still modest, but it was no longer defined by fear. One Thursday afternoon, Angela stopped by the clinic to drop off updated program materials. When she saw Lucia in scrubs again, greeting patients with the calm professionalism she had once mastered, Angela couldn't help but smile. "You look like you were born for this," she said. Lucia laughed softly. "I forgot how good it feels to help people again." "You never stopped helping people," Angela replied. "You just needed someone to help you for a change." That evening, Angela visited the apartment again this time, carrying a stack of papers and a cardboard box filled with food staples. Evan opened the door and greeted her with the enthusiasm he reserved only for a handful of people. "We stocked the kindness closet today," he announced proudly. "We added new hygiene kits and some notebooks. Kids were already taking things before lunch." Angela's eyes warmed. "That closet is making a real difference, Evan. Your teachers told me students are coming to school more confident because they don't feel embarrassed about things they can't control." Evan shrugged, but his shy smile betrayed how much it meant to him. They gathered in the living room while Lucia changed out of her scrubs. When she returned, Angela gestured for her to sit. "I have something to tell you," Angela said. "A new family just entered our program today, a single mother with 2 young kids. They arrived with almost nothing." Lucia felt a tug in her chest. The memory of her own first day with the program, the exhaustion, the fear, the uncertainty, still sat close to the surface. "How old are the children?" she asked softly. 7 and 4, Angela replied. "They're scared. The mother is doing her best, but they're overwhelmed. I thought maybe you and Evan could help with their first food package. Sometimes familiar faces aren't enough. Sometimes people need to see others who've lived what they're living." Evan didn't wait for his mother to answer. "We should do it," he said, sitting up straighter. "I remember how it felt. I want them to know it gets better." Lucia looked at him with pride shining behind her eyes. "Then we'll do it." The next day they met Angela at the nonprofit's storage facility. Rows of metal shelves overflowed with canned goods, pasta, rice, diapers, and donated toiletries. Evan grabbed an empty cardboard box and began filling it with the precision of someone who understood exactly what mattered most. Soups that didn't require much cooking, fruit cups for the children, soft bread, peanut butter, a few small treats. Lucia added sanitary items, pain relievers, and a set of new socks. When the box was full, Evan taped it shut carefully and wrote a small note on the top. "You're not alone." As they walked the box out to the car, Evan spotted a familiar figure approaching. Keanu had arrived wearing a simple gray sweatshirt and jeans, his presence as steady as ever. "Heard you two were doing something important today," he said with a smile. Evan grinned. "We're helping a new family." "Then I'm glad I'm here," Keanu replied. "Let's make their first day a little easier." Together they drove to the temporary shelter. The building was old but well kept. Inside they found the family sitting on a worn couch, a tired mother holding her youngest, the older child curled into her side. Evan stepped forward first, offering the box with both hands. "This is for you," he said softly. "People helped us when we needed it. Now we want to help you." The mother's eyes filled with tears. She whispered thank you over and over, her voice cracking with relief. Keanu knelt beside the children, speaking gently, asking their names, offering encouragement, the same way he had once offered it to Evan. And in that moment, Lucia understood something profound. Hope wasn't something you received once. It was something you passed on. A few evenings after they helped the new family at the shelter, the apartment felt unusually quiet. Lucia had finished her shift at the clinic and was warming leftover soup on the stove. Evan sat cross-legged on the living room floor, sorting through school papers. The light from the small table lamp cast a warm glow across the room, making the space feel safe, almost sacred. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Evan looked up and his face brightened when he saw Keanu standing in the doorway. He carried no grocery bags, no boxes, nothing to fix or replace, just himself. Something about his expression was softer than usual, thoughtful, in a way that hinted tonight wasn't about errands or check-ins. Tonight felt different. "Can I sit with you both for a bit?" he asked. Lucia nodded and motioned him inside. She turned off the stove and joined them in the living room. Keanu lowered himself onto the carpet beside Evan, not choosing the couch or a chair, but sitting at their level as he always did. For a moment, they simply rested in the quiet. Then Keanu took a slow breath, the kind someone takes when they're deciding whether to share something long buried. "You've both asked me before," he began gently, "why I help people the way I do, why I stay quiet about it, why I show up instead of writing a check or making a big foundation speech." Lucia folded her hands in her lap. Evan leaned forward a little, sensing something meaningful was coming. "I think it's time I tell you the whole story," Keanu said. He paused, as if gathering courage. "When I was a kid, we didn't have much. My father left early, and my mother worked every job she could find. Sometimes 2 at a time, sometimes 3. We moved constantly. Apartments, rooms, basements, places that barely counted as homes. There were nights when I didn't know what tomorrow would look like." Lucia's breath caught. His voice wasn't dramatic, just honest. A quiet truth he rarely let surface. "I used to lie awake." He continued, hoping someone would see us. Not pity us, not judge us, just see us. Because when you're struggling like that, you feel invisible. Or, worse, unwanted. Evan looked down at his hands. He knew that feeling too well. "There were a few people," Keanu went on, "strangers, mostly, who helped us. One gave us warm meals. Another gave my mom a small discount on groceries when she was stretching every dollar. A neighbor let me borrow books. None of them knew how much those small acts meant. They didn't solve everything, but they gave us moments to breathe." He exhaled, long and slow. "I promised myself that when I grew up, if I ever had the chance, I would do the same for someone else. Quietly, without expecting anything back." Lucia wiped a tear from her cheek. Evan whispered, "Did helping us remind you of them?" Keanu nodded softly. "More than you know." Keanu shifted slightly, resting his arms loosely on his knees. His eyes softened as he looked at Evan, then at Lucia, as if the weight of his memories felt lighter when shared. The room stayed quiet, holding the space for him. "There was a winter when things were really bad," he continued. "My mom and I were living in a small, rented room above a store. The heater barely worked. She was exhausted, juggling 2 jobs, and I could tell she felt like she was failing me. But she never stopped trying. Not once." Lucia swallowed hard. She knew that feeling, that ache that lived deep in the chest of a parent trying to hold everything together while quietly breaking inside. One night, Keanu said, a woman from down the hall knocked on our door. She barely knew us, but she handed my mom a small bag of groceries. Just bread, cheese, and soup. Nothing fancy. But when you're hungry, that becomes a miracle. He paused, his voice steadier now. "I never forgot that kindness. I never forgot how my mom cried that night. Not because she felt helpless, but because for the first time in a long time, she felt seen." He looked up, meeting Lucia's eyes with a gentle honesty. "That's what I want to be for people. Someone who sees them. Someone who knows what that struggle feels like without judging it." Lucia pressed a hand to her mouth, tears slipping down her face. Evan moved closer to her, leaning gently against her side. She wrapped an arm around him, as if grounding herself in the moment. Most people, Keanu continued quietly, look at someone who's struggling and walk away because they don't know what to do. Or, worse, they assume it's their fault. As a kid, that made me feel small, unworthy. So I made myself a promise, if I ever saw someone fighting to stay afloat, I wouldn't walk away. Evan glanced up. "Is that why you helped us?" "Because you saw us struggling." Keanu nodded. "Because I saw a boy doing everything he could to keep his mother safe. Because I saw a mother who refused to give up even when the world kept hitting back. And because I remembered what it felt like to hope someone, anyone, might step in for a moment." Lucia lowered her gaze, her shoulders trembling. "I felt ashamed," she admitted. "That day in the van." I thought if anyone saw us, they would judge us or try to take Evan from me. I know, Keanu said softly. That fear is real. My mom felt it too. She always believed that asking for help meant she'd be seen as weak. But she wasn't weak. She was the strongest person I knew. And you're the same, Lucia. She blinked back more tears. Some days I didn't feel strong at all. That's why kindness matters, Keanu replied. It fills the cracks until you can stand on your own again. Evan wiped his cheek with the back of his hand. Do you ever get tired of helping people? He asked, his voice small but sincere. Keanu smiled, a soft, reflective smile, touched by something deeper than joy. No, because every time I help someone, I feel like I'm thanking the people who once helped me. I can't repay them directly. Most of them are gone, or I never knew their names. But I can pass it forward. Lucia breathed in slowly, letting his words settle into her heart. I didn't realize, she whispered, that helping us was also helping you. Keanu nodded. In its own way it was. The apartment felt full, then not with things, but with understanding. A connection had solidified between them, built not on charity or gratitude alone, but on shared experience, vulnerability, and the quiet recognition of wounds that had shaped them all. Lucia reached for Keanu's hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you, she said, not with desperation this time, but with genuine warmth. Keanu squeezed back. Thank you for trusting me. Evan leaned into his mother's side, watching them both with wide, tender eyes. For the first time, he understood something essential. Kindness didn't just save people. It connected them, healed them, strengthened them in ways deeper than food or shelter could ever reach. And in that moment, on that quiet evening, their little family and the man who entered their lives with a simple act of compassion became bound by something stronger than circumstance. They became bound by the kind of humanity that lasts. 6 months passed in a way that felt impossible to measure. Not because time moved quickly, but because every week carried a kind of gentle healing Lucia and Evan had once believed would never come. The apartment they now called home was warmer, brighter, and filled with small pieces of their new life. Drawings from Evan's art class were taped proudly to the living room wall. A painted cardboard sun, a sketch of a tree with roots reaching deep underground, a careful portrait of Lucia smiling, and one still hanging unevenly because Evan said it should stay exactly as it was, showed a man in a black motorcycle jacket helping a small boy gather cans off the ground. Lucia looked healthier than she had in years. Her face regained color, her hands steadied, and the shadows under her eyes faded as proper medication and rest worked their quiet miracles. She now worked 4 days a week at a small community clinic doing administrative tasks and basic patient assistance to rebuild strength. On the mornings Evan left for school, she hugged him without the stiffness or pain that once made simple gestures difficult. Evan's transformation was just as profound. He laughed more. He slept through the night without waking at every little noise. His teachers said he was thriving, and he found himself joining school clubs he didn't even know existed before. The reading club welcomed him instantly. The volunteer committee asked him for ideas. His art teacher encouraged him to keep drawing, noticing how his pictures told stories he didn't always have the words to express. He kept one picture private, tucked into his notebook. It showed his mother standing tall, sunlight behind her, no longer weighed down by illness or worry. That was his favorite. Angela's nonprofit also changed. The new funding, quiet, anonymous, but substantial, allowed them to expand their emergency housing program, add more case managers, and supply additional medical assistance. Angela confided privately to Lucia that she had her suspicions about the donor, but she smiled knowingly and said, "Some people do their best work without needing applause." Lucia didn't need to guess. Whenever she saw a black motorcycle ride past the clinic or heard Evan mention Keanu's name with a soft reverence, she understood exactly where that anonymous support had come from. On a warm Saturday afternoon, the community gathered for a neighborhood event, celebrating families who had graduated from the assistance program. Tables filled the park, scattered with paper plates, lemonade cups, and flyers about new resources. Children ran between the playground and the open field, laughing as they chased bubbles floating through the air. It was the kind of joy Evan used to watch from a distance. Now he stood in the middle of it. Angela approached with a microphone in her hand. "Evan," she said gently, "would you like to say a few words? You don't have to, but I think people would really love to hear from you." Evan froze for a moment, nerves rising like a wave. But then he saw his mother smiling at him from a picnic table, hands clasped together with pride. He remembered all the people who helped them all the nights he once feared they wouldn't survive, and the simple act of kindness that changed their path forever. He nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll try." Angela handed Evan the microphone, and the crowd quieted as he stepped onto the small wooden platform beside the community banner. His hands trembled slightly, but when he looked out and saw families just like his people who had faced hunger, fear, and loneliness, something inside him steadied. "My name is Evan," he began softly. His voice shook at first, but it strengthened as he continued. "A few months ago, my mom and I were living in our old van behind a store. She was sick. I was trying to take care of her. I used to collect cans just to buy bread. I didn't think anything could change." The air grew still. Parents leaned closer. Volunteers exchanged glances, filled with empathy. But then Evan said, drawing a breath, "Someone saw us, not just the hard parts, not the struggle. He saw us as people. And he helped us, without asking for anything back." Lucia pressed a hand to her heart. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were the good kind, the proud kind. Evan continued, growing more confident with every word. He wasn't a superhero. He didn't come with cameras or a big announcement. He was just a kind stranger in a motorcycle jacket who cared enough to stop and ask if we were okay. A murmur rippled through the audience, an understanding whisper passing from person to person. "Because of him," Evan said, "and because of Angela and the people here, my mom is getting better. We have a real home. I get to go to school again, and I get to help other families who feel scared the way we did." He paused, emotion tightening his throat. "So, thank you. Thank you for helping us. And thank you for helping people who need someone to believe in them." The crowd applauded, warm and heartfelt. A few people wiped tears. Angela placed a steady hand on Evan's shoulder as he stepped down from the platform, his cheeks flushed with both relief and pride. Near the back of the park, partially shaded beneath a tree, stood Keanu. He wore his familiar black jacket helmet tucked under one arm, sunglasses hiding his eyes. But the smile, small, gentle, deeply moved, was unmistakable. He hadn't come to be recognized. He never did. He came to witness the full circle of a life once teetering on the edge, now blooming into something strong and bright. Lucia spotted him first. Their eyes met, and she nodded in quiet gratitude. He returned the nod before slipping away, blending into the gentle hum of the park content, with knowing that the spark he helped ignite was burning stronger than ever. Evan glanced toward the back, sensing rather than seeing him. And even though Keanu was already gone, he smiled. Because he knew the man who saved them didn't need to stay in the spotlight to keep changing lives. Evan sat on the small balcony of their apartment, the evening sun resting warmly across the buildings. 6 months earlier, this same city had felt enormous and cold. Now, it felt different. It still had challenges and noise and hard days, but it no longer felt like a place that was trying to swallow him. It felt like a place he could grow in. He rested his arms on the railing, watching a group of kids ride scooters down the sidewalk below, laughing as they zigzagged around one another. He smiled at the sound. Laughter, real laughter, had become a regular part of his life again, something he didn't realize he had missed until it returned. His mother stepped outside with a cup of tea in her hand. The warmth rose softly from the mug, mixing with the colors of the sunset. She looked healthier now, her shoulders relaxed instead of clenched in constant pain. She still had medical appointments. She still had hard days when her joints ached or fatigue swept through her body. But there was a steadiness to her now, a kind of quiet strength that came from knowing that tomorrow didn't have to be a battle for survival. "You're thinking again," she said gently. Evan shrugged. "Just remembering." Lucia leaned against the railing beside him. "It feels like a lifetime ago." But Evan shook his head. "It doesn't feel like a lifetime ago. It feels like yesterday, and also like something that happened to a different version of us. Lucia nodded, understanding what he meant before he said it. Evan took a breath, letting his thoughts settle into words. Life isn't perfect now. We still have bills. I still worry about you sometimes, and I still get nervous when people ask about our old address. He looked down at his hands. But it's better. It's so much better. Lucia touched his shoulder, grounding him with a gentle squeeze. He continued, voice soft but steady. I keep thinking about the day I bumped into Keanu. How scared I was. How hungry. How Mom hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. How I thought asking for a sandwich might ruin everything. He swallowed, remembering the knot in his stomach, the fear that any wrong move might get them noticed by someone who would take him away. But instead he said, "That moment saved us." He lifted his eyes toward the sky. I thought I was trying to get food. I didn't know I was about to meet someone who would change our whole life. Lucia smiled, her eyes shimmering. Sometimes help comes when we least expect it, she whispered. Evan nodded. Keanu didn't treat me like a problem. He didn't treat me like a kid who didn't belong. He just saw me, a boy trying to take care of his mom. His voice softened even more. I didn't know how much that mattered until someone finally did it. Inside the apartment, his mother's phone buzzed with a reminder for her medication. She moved a step inside, pausing only long enough to press a kiss to Evan's forehead. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. We made it here together. Evan watched her go, the warm glow of the lamp inside outlining her silhouette. He breathed in the moment, the safety, the peace, the knowledge that tomorrow wouldn't be defined by fear, and let the gratitude settle deep in his chest. Later that week, Keanu visited again. He didn't stay long. He never wanted to disrupt their routines, but he sat with Evan for a few minutes at the small dining table, while Lucia finished sorting her medication in the kitchen. The apartment lights created a soft, inviting glow, and Keanu looked around with quiet satisfaction. Every shelf, every corner, every sound of Lucia humming was proof that their story had turned a corner. Evan looked up at him. Do you ever think about how one moment can change everything? Keanu nodded thoughtfully. All the time. Sometimes it's a big moment. Sometimes it's something small, but it always matters. He rested his arms on the table, his voice calm and steady. The hard times you went through, they don't disappear, but they don't define you anymore either. Evan felt the truth of that settle inside his chest. Keanu continued, everybody carries battles no one else can see. If we all took a second to notice each other, really notice, the world would look very different. He paused, then added, compassion doesn't have to be loud. Most of the time, the quiet kind changes the most lives. Evan thought about the day they met, about the cans scattered on the concrete, about how ashamed he felt, and how somehow Keanu had seen past all that, straight to the part of him that wanted to protect his mother. Thank you, Evan said. It was simple, but it carried months of meaning. Keanu smiled softly. You don't owe me anything, Evan. Just keep being the kind of person who sees others. That's how you pay it forward. After he left, Evan stepped back onto the balcony and looked out at the city again. The buildings, the streets, the people below, they no longer felt unreachable. They felt like a place he belonged, a place where he could grow into someone strong enough to help others just as he had once been helped. He whispered into the evening air, one act of kindness really can change everything. And he knew it was true because he was living proof. As the screen fades, Evan's final reflection becomes a quiet message for anyone listening. Life isn't perfect now. There are still bills, still challenges, still long days. But there is hope. There is safety. There is a future. All because someone noticed. All because someone cared. And now Evan believes that anyone, even a scared child searching for food, can become part of a chain of kindness that stretches farther than they'll ever see. If this story touched your heart, share an act of kindness you've witnessed in your community. Your story might inspire someone else today. What small moments of compassion have made a difference in your world